Hey, so I haven't made one of these videos in a while, and I'm just kind of like gonna basically kind of wing it. I've got some ideas that I've to talk about regarding the Scorpio full moon coming up. I'm doing a clubhouse group later on today, and I'm kind of like, it'll be interesting to maybe like share some of the stuff with people in the group or see how it kind of bounces off of other people. Right now, I'm just kind of recording this video, not even as like a live stream or anything. I'm just recording it as a blog, and maybe I can explore some of these ideas. Um, so, I mean, the main thing that I'm kind of getting into here is thinking about the dynamic between Taurus and Scorpio, where we have the sun in Scorpio and the moon, or sorry, the sun in Taurus, and the moon is going to be in Scorpio. Actually, when I'm recording this, the moon's in Libra, and I'm kind of like looking ahead to the dynamic, that's going to start happening. I think tomorrow is when the moon goes into Scorpio. Um, and to get into it, with Venus as the ruler of Taurus, Venus, one of the things Venus stands for is like beauty, kind of sensuality. Of course, it stands for things like love and relationships and stuff like that. But I think there's a certain side of Venus that sort of stands for like adornments and kind of beautifying things or purifying things or cleaning things up, making them presentable. Um, and I think there's something about that which, I mean, for one thing, if you think about it, it does speak to the kind of like impermanent nature of things, because the nature of cleaning is that rarely is there something that you clean and it just stays clean forever. Usually, when you clean something, it gets dirty again and you have to clean it again. Um, and that whole fluctuation between something being purified or something being soiled and dirty is a kind of ever present flux, going flip flopping from one thing to the other, and a constant kind of task that we have to do to clean things up and make them presentable and stuff like that. Um, there's also the whole thing about like fashion and decorating things and things being adorned, and it's like there's a sort of the idea that the Venus kind of stands for this thing where the presence of something, we put these kind of adornments around it to kind of accentuate the presence that's there. But I think one of the shadow sides of Venus is that sometimes these adornments can be kind of seen as something that's like superficial, that we sort of like dress something up to make it look better. We try to make something look more presentable, and maybe that might be because there might be kind of like an insecurity that's there, that we're not completely confident in the ability for something to just stand on its own without being dressed up with all these adornments, right? And that we have to, like, we it's like if I'm going into something and I'm not confident that people are going to just see my innate value without me trying to make that, it's like if I don't think, I'm not going in something confident that people are going to see me and hear me and as who I am or what I have to bring to the table. I might feel this need that I need to dress it up a lot more, and I might need to present it in a certain way. Um, so there's there's also this kind of quality though about like what is, when we kind of put often kinds of adornments and these kind of decorations. If you think of like the magic tricks of like a sleight of hand, it's like often they're used in a way to like distract the attention so that you look at this shiny thing and so you don't see what's happening over there, kind of thing. You know what I mean, right? And so I think that the thing about when you get into a full moon in Scorpio, it kind of shows like the flip side of the Venusian adornment kind of quality, which one of the things that came to mind when I was thinking about this is it might be a little bit like off the radar of the usual astrology audience, but there's a one of the things that I've also been following along with online is the work of the late cultural theorist Mark Fisher. On Facebook, there's a Facebook group called Mark Fisher Means for Hauntological Teens, and the so there's this idea of hauntology, and that's actually something that he got from Derrida. But to sort of back it up a little bit, I think it actually kind of fits well with Scorpio, because if you think about Scorpio being Halloween season, and with now that we're in a Taurus season, this is sort of like 6 months from Scorpio season. It's the other side of the year. It's like the opposite of Halloween time in the springtime, and the full moon is sort of like reflecting that light from the opposite side, right? And so in the middle of the spring, it's sort of like there's this question. It maybe even suiting, right? Because it's like the whole quality of a full moon is kind of like, if all the emphasis of the solar season is on this Taurus season with springtime and the beauty of flowers and fragrances and sensual stuff, there's this question of like, what is it that isn't there, And that's when you get into the quality of hauntology. It's like the hauntedness of the what is absent, right? There's something that's missing. There's also I've been also following along with a group online called the Acid Left, and they're doing a Mark Fisher book right now called The Weird and the Eerie, and he talks about this quality of eeriness as being like the weird being the presence of something unusual, and the eeriness is being the weird absence of something. That it's like something is eerie not when there's something there, but it's like like when you're walking in COVID, when you're walking along the street and in a place that used to be really bustling with activity and it's completely empty, there's a certain eeriness that comes with that, right? And so I think that there's to bring in this thing about hauntology. One of the things that Derrida said about hauntology was that it's kind of like whenever we have a conversation. This is kind of funny. This is probably not going to be a very good video because I think my iPad's kind of I'm just sitting on a bed and I think it's kind of bouncing a little bit, but we'll have to bear with me here. One of the things about hauntology is Derrida had this line about, like, he's a philosopher, right? And he was pointing out that, like, philosophers could write on all sorts of different topics, but one of the things that you rarely would hear a philosopher talk about is their own sex life. Because like their own sex life would be something personal and private and not really something for the academic sphere, but it's sort of like, it's like everybody's presenting this thing, but like what's going on behind the scenes, like what's all the stuff that's not making it onto the page? What's all the stuff? If I'm making this video, I'm choosing to tell you about certain things that come to my mind that I could associate with the Scorpio full moon, but what about all the things that I'm not telling you about the Scorpio full moon? And I think that in itself, we start to get into what the meaning of Scorpio really is, because Scorpio has this quality that's like private, that's secretive, that it's like the poker face, that they're like holding their cards and they're not, they're trying to like hide what they're holding in their hand, and they're being a bit more reserved about it, and they're not gonna say everything that's on their mind, and they're gonna, that is something of the archetype of Scorpio. And you can see that it's like it's not separate from the Taurus thing. Like the Taurus thing might be like less about what we're hiding and more about, look at this beautiful thing. Look at this like pleasant meal that I prepared. Look for this. Look, like, let me sing you a song, right? Whereas there's something about Scorpio which is like the shadow of it, and it's like, what is it that what happened in the slaughterhouse that went into this meal that you were making, right? Or what didn't make it, and what are the lyrics that didn't make it in this song that I scratched out that I didn't want to put into the music? What is what am I omitting and keeping secret, right? And now I'm a traditional astrologer, and I don't use Pluto as something as a ruler for Scorpio, right? But I think it's still interesting to explore the Pluto archetype, because there's something about Pluto that also has to do with what's hidden, what's secret, and there's also this power in Pluto, though. And I think that like a good example of like the Pluto power dynamic would be like that you can use secret things as a way to blackmail people. Not that I'd recommend this, but it's sort of like you have knowledge of something that people would rather keep secret, and that there's, if you know what people want to keep secret, then that is something that you can use as power over them, unfortunately. And it also gets in this whole thing about, like, Scorpio. Scorpio traditionally ruled the sex organs, so there's all this stuff about, keeping your sex life private and secret, and which fits in really well with the Derrida thing. Uh, but yeah, it's kind of like this thing about what we choose to omit. And if you look too at the traditional dignity system, the moon exalts in Taurus, but the moon's in its fall in Scorpio. So what does it mean if the moon? So, like, I think one of the things that I think about that is that if you think about the moon as being like the receiver, the moon doesn't have light of its own, but the moon takes in light from the sun. And the moon sort of said, like, there's this idea from that if a moon hit a planet, like as a conjunction, it's like the effect of a plectrum, which is like a guitar pick plucking a string and sounding that planet, right? And so the moon is sort of said to resonate or sound whatever it's around. In ancient astrology, or the general principle of astrology was that you sort of had these energies that worked their way down through the planetary spheres, and with the moon being the closest object to the Earth, the moon sort of had this job of translating these sort of cosmic energies down into what would, rain down. If you look at the tarot card of the moon in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, it sort of shows these like moony things dripping down, like cosmic moisture coming down from the moon. And it's like, that is, it's sort of translating down all the different energies and stuff like that. So the thing is, if Scorpio represents the things that we don't want to be seen, the things that we were omitting. There's also this thing about ghosts, what's haunting, right? What is haunting? What is not there? What is absent that we've removed, or what maybe in a Venusian fashion we're distracting away from? Don't look at that over there. Look at this beautiful thing instead. I think this has something to do with the reason why the moon has its fall in Scorpio, is because it's showing us something that we don't want to see. It could be some ugly truth we don't want to look at. It could be exposing some part of us that we are sensitive about and that we're trying to hide or cover up. It could be like illuminating taboos, secrets, these kind of things that would be used as blackmail. I don't know if I'm getting repetitive here, but I think that basically has something to say about the dynamic between Scorpio and Taurus anyways. There's also some interesting things going on here where this is not just any old Scorpio Taurus full moon. It's you've got a triple conjunction that just happened recently between Mercury, Venus, and Uranus in Taurus. And so Uranus brings this thing about, like, it's associated with disruptions, with shocks, with breaking the normal, the things that are unexpected. And when you've got Mercury is the communicator, the messenger, Venus has to do with the stuff about, beauty and ornamentation and friendship and socialization. And so when you put all those together, it's like, and you've got the full moon it's like there could be some really sort of like unexpected, disruptive communications taking place, things that are dredging up the stuff in a very scorpionic way, going into the depths and bringing out the stuff that we may not be find that comfortable, that we may not want to be brought up. We don't may not want a big spotlight shone on. We may not want this stuff to be exposed. So I think that when you factor in the influence of Uranus with with Mercury and Venus that just happened recently, that's also going to put a really interesting spin on this full moon. I also think that if you factor in that there's a square taking place like all year long between Saturn and Uranus, and that Venus and Mercury have just gone kind of set off this square. There's something, in traditional astrology, it matters what side something's being squared from. And when there's a square between Aquarius and Taurus, Aquarius is in the superior position because it's further along in the order of the zodiac. It's the 10th sign from Taurus. There's a condition called upon the 10th, or being decimating, where basically Saturn is exacting attacks from Venus, Uranus, and Mercury. And so one of the things that we could look at that with is that, although there's this kind of like breakthrough kind of thing happening with Uranus, it's kind of being maybe muted out a little bit by Saturn, or that it could be changes or breakthroughs that are in favor of something that's actually more, let's say, conservative. I'm not talking about maybe politically conservative, but maybe conservative in the way of like, rather than breaking free and having a big fun party, it's like breaking free to be a bit more reserved. You know what I mean? Breaking free to some solitude or some quiet, rather than breaking free to just to go wild and crazy or something like that. It could be. There's also something I saw in the news about how in Germany they're creating a less sexualized outfits for gymnasts to sort of like, so there could be like, this question about like freedom and liberation for women's stuff, and whether, is Venus Uranus going to be like free the nipple, or is it going to be free women from objectification and they can, cover up more? When Saturn is in the superior position, it's gonna be maybe less about this sort of like, free spirited, let it all hang out thing, and more about like getting free of the objectification and going in a more conservative direction, right? Another thing, I don't know. There's some stuff like that. Maybe you get the idea. It's going more in a direction that I would say is kind of conservative, restrained, controlled, rather than like break free and do whatever you want. And that's simply because of the superior position of Saturn to Uranus. And then it's kind of interesting because like the moon in Scorpio is a little bit different, because that kind of creates a big kind of like what you'd call like a grand cross with the whole situation, right? But I mean actually it wouldn't really be a grand cross because you don't have anything in Leo happening yet. So I'll take that back. There's also, Mars is in Cancer now, which is interesting because there's a mutual reception between between the moon in Scorpio and Mars in Cancer. One of the things there's this sort of I'm just gonna leave it there though for now, because I think I'm kind of doing this kind of off the top of my head, and I'm gonna have to like sit and stew a little bit more on this mutual reception thing. But I'll give you this for now anyways.